Hi there. I'm Claudia Hosky from FedInsider, and on behalf of the George Washington University College of Professional Studies and KPMG, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on enhancing logistics with supply chain visibility. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A pod on the left side of your screen. If we don't get to them during today's conversation, we'll share them with our speakers so they can follow up with you. Also, take note of the Resources tab right next to it, where you can download today's slides and other reading materials on the topic. We offer live captioning for all of our webinars. To follow along with us, use the hyperlink under the Live Captioning or CART tab located above the slides. We'll have the full transcript available for download in the next couple of days. And to earn training credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all survey questions and stay online for the duration of today's 60-minute conversation. And now, let me turn over the reins to our moderator, Jane Norris from FedInsider. Take it away, Jane.
Thanks, Claudia. I appreciate that. And thank you all for tuning in today. We really appreciate you attending this great webinar. We're going to talk about supply chain logistics, enhancing logistics with supply chain visibility, to be exact. And we have some incredible speakers, so you'll meet them in just a moment. But let me tell you a little bit about the topic first. You won't find it difficult to prove that battles, campaigns, and even wars have been won or lost primarily because of logistics. General Dwight D. Eisenhower once said. Agencies in the national security and public safety sectors, such as the Department of Defense and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, understand the critical importance of logistics in ensuring that the right personnel and the right materials are available to carry out their missions. An efficient and secure supply chain relies on key processes for effective logistics, one of which involves developing supply chain visibility, very important, that it's integrated into supply planning. Supply chain visibility connects logistics and supply chain activities to deliver operational support. It involves providing real-time data flow, predictive analytics, and seamless communication among numerous stakeholders. Today, thought leaders from government and industry discuss ways to enable better and faster decision-making, build resilience, and optimize resource allocation, and address challenges such as capacity constraints, supply chain disruptions, and operational bottlenecks. So before we get started with this very interesting conversation, I'd like to introduce you to your speakers today. So allow me to introduce Soujanya Jamboni. Soujanya is the Director of the Division of Logistics Services and lead of the NIH Supply Chain Risk Management Program. Soujanya, it's an honor to have you. Tell us a little about the background you have and your work.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for inviting me here. Yes, my name is Soujanya Jamboni. I'm the Director of the Division of Logistics Services at the National Institutes of Health. I started my career in DoD as an engineer and also worked in the private sector in pharma and defense and supply chain management. I came to HHS in 2013. I really love public health and making sure that we're working behind the scenes to make sure our clinicians and scientists and ultimately the American public are able to have the products and important mission critical items that they need to keep our public health going and going strong. So at the Division of Logistics Services, we operate our central warehouse, supply warehouse. So we provide NIH with mission critical lab supplies, PPE, and much more. So thank you so much for inviting me here.
Pleasure to have you, and thank you for that background. By the way, you can see everyone's background, all of our speakers, on your resources tab, so please check that out. Let's also introduce Ryan Samuelson. Ryan is Director of the Joint Distribution Process Analysis Center for the U.S. Transportation Command, or TRANSCOM. Ryan, it's a pleasure to have you. Tell us a little about your background and your work.
Well, Jane, it's my honor to be with this crowd and with this distinguished panel as well. What we do here at TRANSCOM is we essentially analyze everything that moves through the global transportation network, from both commercial carriers doing work for the Department of Defense and our own military joint force that's out there. So that's what we do. I spent nearly 30 years in the United States Air Force on active duty as a air mobility pilot, went off to private industry for a little while, in an engineering firm, and then find myself back inside of DoD as a civil servant right now with the Analysis Center. So we have a team of data scientists and engineers on behalf of the combatant command, and really almost on behalf of the joint staff as well, that analyze anything from day-to-day movements to capacity, throughput, constraints around the world through our routes and nodes that may either enable or constrain military movements, whether that be for combat operations or whether it be for humanitarian support. So I appreciate the introduction. Looking forward to the panel discussions.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service to the country. Appreciate it. We can't wait to hear more about what you do and how you do it in the supply chain field. So let's also meet Rear Admiral Doug Noble, of course, retired, was in the Supply Corps for the U.S. Navy, and now is Managing Director for Federal Advisory at KPMG U.S. Doug, pleasure to see you, and please tell us a little about your background and your work.
Hey, good afternoon, Jane. Thanks. It is a pleasure to be here. My name's Doug Noble, and I am Managing Director here at KPMG, where we work on leveraging technology modernization and taking commercial best practices, specifically in my arena, to bring those in to strengthen and improve supply chains where we can help in the federal space and the defense supply chains. As Jane mentioned, I'm a retired Navy Supply Corps officer with 34 years in uniform, so I come into this space with a painfully too good of an understanding of all the challenges that we see from a military logistics operations. But there are also lots of areas where we can improve. There are lots of areas and opportunities for innovation and capability that's out there in the commercial space. And so what I try to do is bridge that gap between the good ideas that are out there in industry and get those into the hands of our logisticians and our sustainers that are supporting the warfight within DoD. And I'm super excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to the discussions this afternoon.
Well, thank you. And we're excited to have you. And we thank all of you for giving us the information about your background. By the way, all of you who are watching, if you have questions during the panel discussion, please make sure you check us out at the resources tab and send them along. We'd be happy to look at those. So Ryan, if we could start with you, in-transit visibility. That seems to be one of the bylaws of the cornerstones of defense logistics. How does U.S. Transcom define and operationalize supply chain visibility today? And how is visibility data used and applied in your planning?
Well, Jane, thank you for that question. At U.S. Transportation Command, we are absolutely focused on how we generate and sustain the requisite momentum. We'll call that mass, that velocity of our nation's military across both tactical and strategic distances. And we couldn't do that without understanding what we'll call in-transit visibility, or that supply chain visibility for that. In other words, how do we move people, equipment, and supplies at the time, place, and choosing of our nation's desire, and at that scale that's needed? How do we do that? Supply chain visibility gives us that end-to-end awareness. We define it as where is the location of something, whether it be people or unit equipment or supplies, regardless of what we're responding to. It's the status of that stuff. It's the condition, and more importantly, what is the projected delivery time frame of that? The days of, I think, where's Waldo as a kid trying to find something, that doesn't satisfy the Joint Force today. The Joint Force today, and the dynamic nature we employ ourselves around the globe on a day-to-day basis, requires that we know where stuff is, because stuff has a very temporal input to it. And so by using supply chain visibility, both for planning but in execution, that is how we essentially enable the Joint Force to be able to get their mission done here at Transcom. I think I'm quoting Einstein when he said, nothing happens until something moves, right? So that's a mantra we have here in making sure we understand that supply chain. How do we operationalize that? You asked that. One of the things in which we do is tracking. And we'll talk, I think, a little bit today about the data systems and platforms we use as well. But we use things like tracking mechanisms. We use things like radio frequency IDs. We use GPS. We have data integration tools all around our global transportation network, both within the Department of Defense and also with our commercial partners to do that. Why do we need all of that? Because particularly today, with the vast amount of things that move, that collect data, what it allows us to do is improve our forecasting of where are the demands and what is the capacity that Transcom needs to bring, whether it be an air, land, or sea conveyance to satisfy that demand. How do we handle our inventory management? What about predictive maintenance actions on our aircraft? We're using data in that supply chain visibility to better predict where the health of our fleets may be as well. We use it for transportation optimization, which ultimately comes down to resource allocation. So it's visibility to get a mission done, and it's resource allocation. And I will tell you, we must constantly balance that demand and capacity as we move around the globe. And of course, having improved supply chain planning and visibility is vitally important to us.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction, Ryan. We appreciate that. And we'll talk more about the various aspects of your outfit and your systems. So, Jenya, if we could get your perspective. I love the fact that we have, the defense perspective, and we have NIH here to also share their supply chain logistics. So would you walk us through the elements of the NIH visibility architecture, Sojanya, and how it supports NIH's supply chain modernization planning?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. That's a great question. I'm really proud of how the NIH has placed such a spotlight on supply chain management and modernization. I think gone are the days of, having to focus on supply chain out of a reactive necessity. Our leadership has been really committed to proactively achieving resiliency. And there are several ways that we do that. So the first and foremost, what we are continuously doing is we work with the agency to understand, monitor, what are the agency's requirements for products and services. So, as a research institution, we're buying mission critical lab supplies, PPE, like, for example, pipettes, flasks, masks, gloves. We're also procuring services related to clinical trials, research and discovery. And while those seem very different, the commonality is that you still need supply chain illumination in both of those aspects. So it's important that we understand who we're doing business with, where are our suppliers and vendors buying their supplies from. So that market research and due diligence is critical, not just from minimizing the disruptions in our supply chain, but even from a national security perspective. So the second thing that's also a real pillar of this is what federal compliance mandates must we adhere to? Specifically for the Department of Health and Human Services, of which NIH is an agency under, we must comply with a 100% Made in America PPE public law, Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act public law. And so what that means for our supply chain is that ensuring that 100% of the components that go into PPE and 100% of the manufacturing of the end product is made domestically. The benefit is that it helps to grow domestic economy. It lessens our dependency on a foreign supply chain. And it's important that we understand what is the capability of our domestic suppliers. Where are they getting their sources of materials from? What are their work processes? Who are their backup suppliers? So we dive into that level of detail, so we really know ultimately who we're doing business with. And then the last part I would say for supply chain visibility and how the NIH is building that architecture is our systems. We've really been focusing on ensuring that our systems and our data are, they're strong. There's data integrity, that we're able to see real-time data to make decisions. And most of all, that the systems are supporting the needs and mission of the agency. So we analyze trends daily, truly daily, on what are we buying, what is the agency, what products do they need, how frequently are we turning over our inventory, what does surge capacity look like. That helps us understand what we need to put on our shelves. And similar to what Ryan had said earlier, we also, for our $2 billion+ of accountable property that we have here at NIH, to secure the way we're monitoring our assets, we use RFID, or we're getting to a place where we're utilizing RFID more. We're also implementing a network discovery model where when something is connected to the network, it pings. It lets us know that this is an asset that belongs to us, that is pinging onto the network. So those are some of the those modernization techniques that we're using, but also those fundamental pillars of how we monitor the NIH supply chain.
So that's fascinating. Just one quick question. You mentioned that all of your suppliers need to be U.S. suppliers. Is that an attestation on their part, or how do you vet that information?
Sure. So just to be clear, the 100% made in America, the law that I was referring to is specifically for personal protective equipment, PPE, and for certain categories of PPE.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so for that classification of PPE, it is a self-attestation at this point. But it's also market research really gives us a lot of, that due diligence to understand the domestic industrial landscape is really, really, they've been great at partnering with us for us to understand through industry days, through, market research, what are your capabilities? And they've been really great at letting us know, here's our limitations and here's what we're able to do. So self-attestation.
All right, we appreciate that. Thanks very much, Virginia. So let's go to you, Doug, and talk about the most complex logistics operation in the DoD. You've led some of them. So what are the critical links in the defense supply chain, and what technologies or practices can help bridge the gaps between the origin and end user tracking?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks for that question. Yeah, my last job in uniform, so I was at the Defense Logistics Agency, where I was the director of operations, and Ryan did a great job of describing United States Transportation Command, and they have a huge mission, literally global mission, supporting and projecting and sustaining troops around the world. Well, DLA is their partner in the logistics enterprise. I think last year DLA did about $52 billion worth of sales, and for folks in the audience that maybe aren't familiar, Defense Logistics Agency provides everything from food, fuel, medicine, lumber, screws, nuts, bolts, all sorts of repair parts to all of the services and other federal agencies around the world. We also have a warehousing and distribution mission that we work with Transcom on, and a disposition services mission for reclaiming assets at the end of their life. And I think that through that mission, we're probably Transcom's biggest single customer in terms of the volume of material that goes through there. So there really is a tight partnership between those two logistics entities. And so it's just really, it fits all wonderfully into this conversation this afternoon. So when we think about the data sources and the complexity of the system, we've got a variety of systems, and then the data from those that we need to knit together to get visibility across our supply chains. And so, as I think about it, is if I start with the ultimate customer, say we've got an operational unit in the field, it could be a ship, an aircraft squadron, or a soldier or a Marine on the ground, they're going to have their unit level supply system that generates their requirement, whatever it is that they need. And that's going to provide, that will start the data flow of what they need. Some of those things we heard from Ryan already. What is the item identification? What is the quantity that they need? It's also going to give us, from the customer's perspective, information on the priority. What's the urgency of need? When do they need that equipment? That information is going to go from those systems, which across all the services are, each service has their own one of those. And then that's going to flow back into typically one of two places. It'll either come to the Defense Logistics Agency for those items that we provide, or it will go to one of the services if it's material or components that are managed by the Navy or the Army or whomever. And then each of those services have their enterprise resource planning ERP systems that manage the supply and inventory, and will take that. They will marry those requirements up from the customer with the inventory. If we've got it in a warehouse on the shelf somewhere, or we've got a vendor that's holding that material, and that action then gets translated into issuing that material out. But again, that's got to go across those systems. If we don't have it on the shelf, which we hope that we do, or that our vendor has it, then we'll have to refer it out, put it on a contract, or do some other effort to get that item fulfilled. And while that's all playing out, we're also connecting in with our partners, our shipmates over at United States Transportation Command to start the physical distribution, aspect of it. So there's a whole, process and the systems involved in that. The Ryan touched on those to give that in-transit visibility, so we can, when the material, hopefully we had it on the shelf and we get it moving, whether that's through, on a truck, on a plane, on a commercial conveyance, or through a military conveyance. It could be all of those varieties are open, and we need the data that shows us what's that mode of shipment, how's it coming, when is it going to be expected to what's the expected delivery date, as Ryan had said. And so all this information then gets communicated back to the customer, so they can track their shipment, they know when it's going to be delivered to them, and then hopefully that meets their needs, and they can proceed on with their mission. If it's not going to meet their needs, then they can at least understand what's expected, and then they can have hopefully a intelligently informed decision process to decide, okay, what mitigations do I need to do? Do I need to expedite? Do I need to consider alternatives? Those sorts of things. And the other thing that I'll touch on it's easy to get kind of drawn into the operational and the physical flow of material and transactions that are supporting operations. But in parallel to all that is vitally important, and as continues to be reinforced as the department works through its audit journey, is all the financial transactions and everything associated with that, to make sure that we've got good financial accountability, we've got good auditability of what is happening, and then we can be able to make sure that we've got good controls and processes to keep that all moving in a healthy but sustainable fashion. As we continue those operations.
It does seem like we are headed toward clean audits for the Department of Defense in the very near future. And I'm going to ask you and Brian both. Is there's a question from the audience. Have you explored AI-powered predictive products or any AI assistance? It does seem like AI would be an asset in this kind of process.
Yes, it is. It is, and we have, and AI is a very broad landscape. Obviously, I mean, there's a lot that when folks talk about AI, it can mean many things to many different people. But here at KPMG, we have been working on using AI and machine learning models to dig into the data. One of the challenges that we see, and that I saw this in Uniform also, is it's not that we don't have enough data, it's that we have too much data, and we're just drowning in it. And how do you sift through that, find the patterns, find the intelligent signals that are in the data, and then filter out the noise? And so we have been working on that with some of the services, some of our clients, of where we have we can use those tools in the world of AI to filter through that. So I hope that helps, and I'll pass it over to my colleague if Brian's got other perspectives.
Does. Brian, I'd like to get your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, so thank you, Jane. Two parts. One, completely concur with what Doug said on the importance of the financial and the audit systems, right? What we find is that also helps us with efficiency, and efficiency for our movement's sake equals better effectiveness. In the space of AI, I will remind everybody here, particularly if you're a leader in an organization, we are the first generation here to we're going to lead the first generation of AI-informed people. And so ensuring that we raise that talent and give them the tools and the techniques to do that, it's going to be very different than when I entered the military many, many decades ago. We absolutely use AI agents right now here at Transcom. Whether they're simple things in large language models where we have a lot of reference data, a lot of regulations. Hey, we're going to move something to these locations and do this. There's different country regulations and all. There are AI agents out there right now helping us look at, as we send something from here to some point on the globe, what are the rules, regulations, what are the access basing and overflight things, what are the live things, and giving us that data. And so as we spend an awful lot of time in the past gathering the data, trying to figure out what it was telling and doing that, we're using AI here once it's curated, and we can talk a little bit about that in the future, maybe here as well. But what we're doing is bringing that in and then using AI agents that are helping us analyze that data faster, finding possible trends, anomalies, figuring out optimizations that we used to spend a lot of time. I have a use case here where we used to have somebody here curate data on some movement of efficiencies for rail for us. And it used to take about 3 days. That now happens in about less than an hour, which gives that person the time to use their cognitive abilities and their intuition to make better decisions. And so we're using that on a daily basis here at Transcom.
I think that is very important to get across to people, and I see a lot more questions coming in. So please do continue to send those in. I also wanted to talk to you, Ryan, about what the mechanisms you use to keep all the various stakeholders that you deal with informed. I mean, you deal with the combatant commands, you deal with commercial carriers. What's your secret? What's your methodology?
Well, Transcom used to say, as you have geographic combatant commanders that own some area, Transcom owns the globe. Our entire field of requirements start globally and they end globally. And so really to start off, before I actually kind of answer part of that, Transcom's success actually is predicated on 3 critical things. Number one is, do we have a robust and ready system of routes and nodes? Right? That's the networks that have to connect this. Number 2 is, do we have ready and robust conveyances in air, land, and sea that need to move all of this stuff around, sometimes at really great speeds and sometimes at large mass and volume. And then finally, do we have the global command and control structure? Those 3 kind of pillars make our framework for how we get our mission done. And that last piece, that global command and control, Doug kind of alluded to it, of how we work with all these other agencies. And it's really the global command and control system that keeps the other combatant commands, as you asked the question of how do we keep them informed, and commercial carriers. We have both DoD and non-DoD entities every day doing transportation commands in our joint force work. And so it's using that command and control system. We have classified systems. We have commercial systems that blend into ours. An awful lot of forums and working groups. Believe it or not, dialogue facilitates alignment. And so we do an awful lot of forums and working groups for collaboration. And then finally, because of the unique nature of it's not just DoD doing this mission to move stuff, we have a lot of contractual and support agreements, as you can imagine, that the mechanisms that help inform and align on that supply chain visibility. So we have memorandums of agreement with our own other DoD entities, and we have contractual agreements with our commercial partners. Because we are requirements focused. So you need to make sure that whatever conveyance, whatever means we're using, they're properly aligned and informed.
It sounds like a very big and important job. So we appreciate all that you're doing on this front. So thank you for that answer too. So Jania, I wanted to continue with you. So much like our other 2 participants today, Doug and Ryan, there are questions I think for you about, AI and the use of technology, but for things like sourcing, sourcing ingredients even, or other types of PPE that you were discussing earlier, how do you keep bad actors from introducing risk into your supply chain?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yes, so there's definitely some unique supply chain and logistics challenges when you're in a public health agency. I would say some of those visible challenges are like shelf life of products, for example, PPE, enzymes, temperature controlled samples, animal care products, their bedding, food, that sort of thing. There's a real shelf life. Those products go bad if you don't, have them in the right temperature control, if they're not packaged correctly, if they're not moved in a proper way. What types of trucks you would need to transport sub-zero specimens. That's very common here at NIH and an R&D agency. So we have a really great group of logisticians that very diligently monitor those types of things, especially shelf life. They practice inventory methods that are meaningful to the type of product that they're moving and handling. Specifically to your question about sourcing from bad actors, I would consider those like those not so visible risks. They're not right in your face, like the shelf life challenges. That's where the collaboration between our agency's programs, our acquisitions team, our supply chain risk management team, and even just our department-wide support through HHS operating divisions, our Office of National Security. That's where that collaboration becomes really, really critical. So one of the ways we do that is we ensure that we're very proactively sharing information in timely ways. So not waiting until something happens to go back and do damage control, but rather as logisticians and supply chain management professionals, we are pre-vetting suppliers early. We are actively involved in the decisions about, well, hey, if we need to buy a product and we have to move it, what type of logistical support do you need to make sure that product can get to where it needs to go to? Kind of like what we heard earlier from Ryan. It's important for us to understand those risks involved with moving a product that supports medical research. And then I think, so as an outcome of all of that, something that NIH has established and is really working on maturing is our supply chain risk management program. We lovingly call that SCRIM, SCRM. And the primary purpose of the SCRIM program is to do that proactive identification, monitoring, mitigation, and prevention of supply chain risk so that we can really mature from being reactive to becoming resilient. We collaborate with the Office of National Security to support the classified and the unclassified research whenever we're vetting suppliers. We're working on getting to a place where we start that vetting process as early as, your early market research, so that you understand the landscape, you understand who you might even be working with in the future for procurement. And we, across HHS, I have a really great group of SCRIM counterparts. So, this is a way we can leverage if FDA or CDC or IHS, as they're learning things, we can collaborate and work together and say, that's actually helpful for me to learn too. So we share those types of lessons learned. We're working to, make sure that we can share those types of best practices, leverage existing resources where we can, and really just posture ourselves better against those types of risks.
Appreciate that. That must be a very difficult process to go through. It sounds like a lot of elements. So thank you, Sujanya, for giving us visibility into that. I do see some questions coming in, and Doug, there's one for you. What tools does KPMG use to audit supply chain controls is one of the questions.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Yeah, so there's a couple things that come to mind when I think about, our KPMG and how we are active in the space with helping out folks with their supply chains, particularly through the lens of audit. So first off, organizationally, KPMG within KPMG, we have an audit practice as well as an advisory practice, and those two teams, while independent for very important reasons because of the nature of the audit, there is a lot of good knowledge sharing and cross-pollination in terms of best practices. So we have folks when we are helping clients and customers with their supply chain processes and modernizing and improving those processes, we have kind of within the KPMG DNA, if you will, is that understanding of from an auditor's lens of what it takes to have an auditable process, what that means, and those sorts of things. So I think that's a tremendous strength, just kind of as a cultural starting point, if you will. And then we've got a variety of tools. I think, it starts with the controls. So whether those are your controls on your systems, physical controls on your processes for how do you have good SOPs, standard operating procedures? Do you have a good internal control program? And how well do folks, how well established are those programs? And then how well does the organization do in following those? And we, as you can imagine, I've seen the gamut from everything from controls and policies don't even exist to, hey, we have them, but we don't really follow them, all the way up to, the kind of the gold standard that we all strive for is that we've got good processes and controls, and that we do a good job of holding ourselves to those and following those through.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much for answering that. And I wanted to ask a question. I think it's probably obvious to many who are involved in the supply chain issue, but why is visibility so critical? I mean, does it lead to other operational performance that is not maybe so obvious?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Yeah, it is. Visibility is critical to enable decision making, and decision making as it relates to operations that are going on. So some of the elements that we've talked about in terms of visibility, we've talked about those already, but we need to be able to see all the requirements. We need to understand where and how those requirements are going to get satisfied. And we need to understand the priority and the urgency of those requirements so we can make sure that we're getting after things in the proper order. In the inventory or the supply front, we want our architecture to be able to give visibility of our inventory levels across echelons. And so in other words, we want to be able to see the inventory at our retail or our operational locations, as well as at our wholesale locations. And we want that we also want visibility of what we've got on order with industry and when those materials are due to be delivered, so we can give ourselves confidence that we're replenishing ourselves and that we've got a sustainable system going on. We need visibility of our distribution networks. Ryan hit on this and laid it out excellently in terms of, how is the material flowing? Is it flowing? Are we seeing delays or bottlenecks in the network? And so for example, we might have congestion at a port, and it's slowing up deliveries. And I said up front that we needed to understand the priority of need. So if we understand the operational impact, then if we have a delay, for example, if we have a delay at that port, we can assess that impact. Maybe it's just a couple days delay or a week, but it's still within the required delivery date. Okay, great. I don't need to worry about that. Alternatively, it could be it's only a delay of a day or even a few hours, and I've seen that in my past life, and it's the part is only a couple hours away, but it's preventing the submarine from getting underway, from leaving the pier. So in those situations, then back to your question, what does that visibility provide? Visibility of knowing the situation, of knowing that status, then enables the decision makers to decide, okay, in the example that I gave, do we want to delay the underway and wait for the part to arrive, or do we want to pursue other methods? Maybe we need to mitigate that by we're going to take that part off of a neighboring ship. We really don't like to do that, but maybe that's the best alternative, giving all the options that are out there that are available to us. And it's not just so that visibility is critical. It gives us the ability to provide timely support to operations around the world. But I want to also just kind of tease out that it's not just the operational forces, overseas forces doing operations and exercises in the field, but it's also vitally important when we think in the United States here, back on the home front, in our industrial space. So the industrial teams in the shipyards that are conducting depot maintenance on ships and submarines, the industrial teams repairing aircraft at the air logistics centers around the United States. Logistics is the critical linchpin to all of those activities, and it's crucial to that. And then when I think about planning and forecasting, I don't want to go without mentioning those. So I took the example we just talked about, the submarine, as the ship is delayed, or the ability to see bottlenecks in a port. That's important, but that's what I just described was really kind of all reacting to problems as they emerge. Really, what we should be striving to do, if we've got that data visibility, is how can we anticipate and predict and see, what might come in the future. So if we see that, hey, historically, this is a heavy, transit season, so we see transportation delays because of whatever causal factors, or if we see, hey, these are the historical demand rates for these items, so let's make sure that we've got enough capacity, enough inventory. That is also, visibility is also an enabler to that, to help us understand the historical performance of our logistics and supply chains systems with all the different permutations of the transportation nodes and all the different ways that we might source material. So then we can make intelligent decisions of how, moving forward, how do we need to best posture the network? Where do we need the nodes? Do we have enough nodes? Do we have enough connectors? Do we have enough inventory? All those sorts of things, so that, again, ultimately, in my mind, what it comes down to is I want to be able to have the decision maker, whoever that may be fully informed with data so they can make the best possible risk mitigation decisions, or decide, when it's appropriate to accept a certain risk.
Doug, you're reading my mind, because I was going to ask about predictive planning and predictive analytics. So thank you for answering before I even asked. I appreciate that. And that leads into my question for Ryan. So Ryan, defense logistics involves integrating data from all these disparate sources, right? We've gotten better at reading it. We've gotten better at understanding it. How does U.S. Transcom work to make data usable across the defense enterprise because of your giant footprint, especially in support of joint planning and decision making?
Well, Jane, thank you. The key word in talking about is what is Transcom working on? Because I will tell you, in this avenue, it is absolutely not an end state. Data integration, data usability, the ability to get it to other partners that need it is absolutely a journey. It is not an end state. For us, accuracy, scale, speed, and security, those four things are absolutely critical in the data. And so what I see in my time in DoD is we oftentimes early on spend a whole lot of time just trying to figure out where data is, how can I get it, and what do I do with it, right? And a lot of times that was just to show situational awareness. And I think one of the audience may have asked a question about, is it just used for logistical kind of stuff, or is it actually used for operational planning? And Doug kind of alluded to that, because what we see is the ability to make data that you are the authoritative source for available for other folks to use it to make decisions. That's the difference between situational awareness, just trying to figure out what your day-to-day visibility looks like, versus really making data-driven decisions, and it's hugely important. DoD a while ago had kind of what they said is, hey, data needs to be in what they call VALTIS, right? Visible, accessible, understandable. Is it linked, trustworthy, interoperable, and secure? And those are a lot of words, but it was basically to say data needs to fit a structure so that we can get beyond the silos and the unique curation that everybody does something and then I can't get them together. So what we're doing here at Transcom, because we end up, as Doug alluded to, a vast amount of data is being generated every single day. And I will tell you, if you opine for perfect data, you will absolutely grow frustrated and you'll be late to need in helping your organization. So you can't opine for perfect data. So what we do is we work with collaborative systems that are both shared awareness systems, and I won't get into the exact vendors, but also systems that allow us to do predictive analytic work. And then share that with the rest of the joint force, for example, and in fact, DLA with some of the collaborative systems we have. We apply here at Transcom a use case. And what I mean by that is we don't just suck everything up and go, well, here's a bunch of data, I don't know what to do. What operational outcome are you trying to solve for your organization? And then we go and say, what is the data that's needed to get that outcome figured out in the best available means? Because what you'll find is sometimes you actually don't need a billion lines of data coming in. You actually may need very short. We have a lot of optimization tools and forecasting tools that once you get authoritative sets and you say, this is authoritative, this is really what's happening, and you can ensure integrity of that data. Sometimes you don't need vast amounts. You need that which is applicable to your use case. And so we do that. And then once we define that kind of authoritative source, we create data catalogs. And that's still a journey for us. I don't want to lead anybody to say that we have figured it out. But what we want to do is make data and catalogs and authoritative processes such that the planners and the decision makers don't spend all their time saying, where are we getting the data, but more on the decision behind the data that's done that. We work a lot on what we call APIs. That's one of the challenges here. APIs are application programming interfaces, and these are driven architectures to expose data and then make it more interoperable, across different systems. I wish we had, one system where we could just come down and say, you'll use this, and this will all integrate. That's not how DoD is structured, nor its commercial partners. So we work also on these bridging so that we can bring things over to do that. We work data sharing agreements. That's really important if you're in organizations. Data is just not free. Anytime it moves, it costs money. Somebody owns it. It could be proprietary if it comes from industry. So we work a lot on data sharing agreements as well with our commercial partners and other DoD. I will tell you, I'm pleased to see the rise of some of the collaborative platforms and ontologies out there that allow us to bring it in and then do that. That is really key. Transcom right now is a pretty good foot on predictive. So we gather a lot of data and say, well, based on what DLA, for example, is flowing us, or the health industry or whatever, this may be what may happen based on that. Where we really need to get to is absolutely prescriptive analytics, and we're starting to play in that. And prescriptive analytics is where we go out there and we get data and we use AI and machine learning behind. And now it is telling you, based on all of this, here's some courses of action or some decisions we think that would meet based on historical analysis of the data. And so that stuff is just starting to roll into Transcom. In fact, we have a quick use case where a commander out here actually every day will log on to the computer, and it will tell this commander the health of certain air mobility fleets. Because what it will do is all of a sudden go, hey, we've been looking at data behind the scenes while you're sleeping, and the AI agents say, we've noticed I'm making this up, but a 10-day trend downward in the C5 aircraft's maintenance reliability or something. Something where before maybe you'd have to inquire about that or you'd ask somebody about that. Now we have agents going to do that so we can get to that prescriptive analytics.
So this is all great because you're leading me right into the future. You're all anticipating, I think, the things that the audience is asking, the things that we all want to know. Is there technology out there on the horizon? So Jenya, I'll pose this to you because I haven't asked you yet. What advanced technologies and analytics are you looking at NIH to help with your supply chain visibility and other aspects of the role that you're in?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's so interesting because I think that the biggest shift, at least for me mentally, has been, we've talked about a lean environment. Let's get lean. But what really has shifted for us is let's get agile. So we've been building we're utilizing data to become more agile, and we're utilizing technology to become more agile. So I also want to caveat by saying we're not at a level where we're using, like a big amount of AI to monitor our data and help us with our data, but we're getting there. We're working on ways to understand our data in a more real-time fashion and to be able to use that for our data decisions. So from a predictive modeling type, one of the things that we do is we look very much at historical purchasing trends, whether it's in a steady state or in a surge environment. What historically is the agency buying? We make sure that the data that we're providing to customers of available inventory, pricing, and so forth is as up to date as possible so that they can make informed decisions on what they buy. It would be, it would be amazing to be able to get to a place, and this is something that we're working on, where you can use AI, for example, to do that type of demand forecasting, watch those patterns and tell us ahead of time that, based on these various criteria of what programs are doing, this is what you should buy. We're not quite there yet. But what we do use is this historic data, but also one of the things that we recently launched was a forecasting module, a forecasting portal, where we asked programs and scientists, clinicians across NIH to say, we know what you have bought, but tell us what you need in the future. And that way it's a start for us to understand how we can work with our suppliers ahead of time, how we can prep our supplier landscape to say, this is the type of capacity we're looking from you, and ultimately how we stock our inventory. We're fine tuning on a daily basis the type of safety stock we keep, so that if we have fast movers, how much do we need to keep? If we have something that's not moving as quickly, do we have suppliers that we can get this from? What type of delivery times do we have for those types of products? I think what's really great about NIH is that, everything that we do here at NIH is very high stakes. It is rapidly evolving, and that's really the nature of the public health mission. And as logisticians, it's been very helpful to have, the leadership and the staff and the expertise to understand that, hey, we can't just use old school methodologies anymore of buying something, tracking it, and then sending it forward to our customer. It's really it has to be a very intentional, predictive, anticipatory thing that we do to understand how much of what are we buying, how much do we need to buy, and from whom are we buying it from. So we're getting there. We're working on it. We're getting there. We still have some work to do, but we've got the right mindset and the direction of where we want to go to even optimize things like delivery schedules, rather than having deliveries every day in a million different directions. How can we optimize our delivery routes? So those are the ways that AI can definitely help us, and that I know that our team is always continuing to brainstorm around.
Yeah, those are, it's fascinating because it seems like supply chain is just absolutely perfectly suited toward, the advancement of technology and the use of these new technologies. So it's going to be fascinating, I think, to really hear what all of you have to say about this. And so Doug, I'm going to switch to you. I know you've talked about blockchain, the immutable blockchain that we all love for, for auditing purposes. What about other technologies like, AI technologies? How do you envision them impacting the supply chain?
Yes, so thanks, Jane. There's a couple areas that are exciting, and I'll end with AI. But before I talk about AI, other technologies that I think about, or other capabilities that we see and work with in the private sector that I think have tremendous applicability for DoD is just the whole realm of automation. We're seeing that both in not only just from a warfighting standpoint with unmanned systems, but the sustainment functions of where we can automate processes where we currently have folks working on that today to bring speed, agility, resiliency, all the things that we've talked about here this afternoon. So that could be automation in the warehouses, for example. Also, I want to give a kind of a quick shout out. We didn't talk about it this afternoon. It's probably a whole nother podcast or webinar session, but on all the capabilities with advanced manufacturing. The services have been working on that for a long time and continue to evolve and refine the capabilities of what you can do with additive manufacturing or advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, if you will. But one specific element to that is germane to today's conversation is the data visibility. Is how do I connect the digital thread that goes all the way, the original data of the drawing and the specs for that widget that I need to make, and can I connect that all the way forward to the place where I'm gonna make that part and produce that. So that's a tremendous capability, and there's all sorts of implications for how that could mitigate in a contested logistics environment to provide capabilities to get material sustainment to our forces, through a variety of means. And then to get to your question about AI is really critical, I think, to bring the speed and agility that we need. If we want to be prepared for, a potential high tempo, high end contingency or conflict, anywhere in the world, we should expect that it's going to be very fast and it's going to be very intense. And so AI is what gives that decision advantage to be able to operate at scale rapidly and quickly. Just very quick data point, at DLA, they award about 10,000 contracts a day. That $52 billion a year that I talked about, a lot of that contracting, 95% of that goes through some sort of automation today. I wouldn't call it AI yet, but it is good very good in the sense that it's automated. We're getting humans out of the loop to bring speed to the process. We need more of that. We need to just kind of keep pushing that frontier of using those advanced capabilities to drive decision making and bring speed to the process.
Yeah, I love this. I feel like we're right there on the precipice. And I think a lot of what you're discussing is called AI today, but it will be more advanced in the future and more capability there. Thank you very much, Doug. Ryan, similar question to you. Is AI and machine learning to begin to play a larger role in supply chain management? So what new efficiencies do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, it is playing, and it will play a role whether we want it to or not. And so we need to be ready. Whether we talk about basic AI, things like helping large language models or AI agents that are going out and doing scouring of data, or whether now what we're moving into is agentic AI, where actually you have artificial intelligence scripts that are actually learning and they're going out and doing their own things, looking for things rather than always being commanded. That is an area. I think the Department of Defense, I think the transportation network, whether it be civilian or not, is right to learn a lot from that. AI will absolutely be here to not only analyze the data and trends, anomalies and all that, but figuring out those optimal solutions. And what that's going to allow us to do is continue to be more and more efficient and continue to allow us to be more and more effective, which in day-to-day is important if we're looking to save resources of finance. And in wartime, it's very, very important to make sure that we are staying ahead of that decision advantage loop, essentially, ahead of some of our enemies. What I would caution, though, is as we talk about AI and do this, one of the things that I think is very, very important, I think about things in 3 T's when we talk about technologies, and particularly in AI. You have the tools, and you'll have a lot of vendors, you have a lot of software and things coming out. These are tools in AI. You have the techniques. How are you going to apply them to your situation? And then there's the final thing, the talent. Who is the talent that's doing these? What I find sometimes we do is we rush into tools and techniques right away with really figuring out, is the talent developed in our organizations to be able to use these new tools and techniques? Because I'll tell you, if you get a large data environment and exquisite techniques and you're optimizing output, but your legacy systems, whether they be the physical systems or your decision-making, are not optimized to handle that, then you have wasted time and resources. And so I think it's an exciting journey, and it's one that on the talent side, we definitely need to continue to move forward in. The final thing I will say is security, particularly for DoD, is hugely important. As you know, with different data sets, there are ways to corrupt that. And when you optimize and you have a corrupted coefficient or an agent in there, it can have massive consequences. So we're going to have to figure out how we deal with the security aspect of that as well.
I love it. I think this conversation has been tremendous. And we have just a few minutes left. So I'm going to do a lightning round and ask each one of you, is there one insight or principle from today's conversation that you think is essential to strengthening supply chain management? Doug, let's start with you.
Hey, thanks, Jane. Yeah, I think what I would offer to the audience here that is, I think it's a defense-oriented audience, is to just not discount the tremendous capability that's out there in commercial supply chain technology, whether that's the software, the systems, the processes. I think we in DoD tend to think of ourselves as unique, and there are certainly military unique aspects to our business, but there is so much that we could learn from industry and leverage quickly rather than kind of designing our own bespoke systems. We've done that in the past. I don't know that it's worked out for us so well. And so I think the faster we move to incorporate industry best practices, that's what I would leave the audience with today.
All right. I appreciate that. So, Jenya, what's your final thought?
Similar to what Doug actually just said, for public health readiness and for to maintain, a sustained supply of mission critical PPE and lab and scientific clinical supplies. It's very important that there's partnerships between the government and the private sector to really have a domestic landscape of suppliers, and even if it's not a domestic landscape supplier, to just have a strong partnership where we can share information on our demand and when we think supply might have a disruption, and just have ongoing conversations so that each party is really, has the transparency to make good decisions.
It is an important thing to remember that it is a much bigger conversation than just our particular area of specialization. Thank you, Soujanya. And Ryan, you get the final word.
Well, thank you. I think you started off with Franklin, with Eisenhower talking about the importance of logistics, right? And I think all of us here have wrapped that to show that supply chain visibility absolutely is the foundational base to all kinds of operations, humanitarian to combat, happening around. What I would tell your team is, as they're thinking through these, don't ever let barriers prevent you from starting. We have plenty of stovepipes and silos and those kind of barriers that can do that. Focus on the tools, the techniques, and most important, the talent that you're developing. Franklin said investment in knowledge pays the best interest, and I can see your audience understands that.
Well, I truly understand a lot more than I did when we began this conversation. So I thank you all for your great participation today. You were wonderful speakers, and really appreciate everyone who watched. We really thank you for joining us during this conversation and all the other conversations that we have ahead. So Saljanya Jamboni, Ryan Samuelson, Doug Noble, we appreciate your time today. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn this back over to Claudia Hosky to wrap things up for us today. Claudia?
Thanks so much, Jane. And thanks again to our speakers and to our wonderful audience today. Thank you for your participation. Training certificates will be emailed after the webinar ends. And remember to log back in the next day or two if you want to download a copy of our closed captioning transcript. We hope you'll join us face-to-face in October for the Innovation Summit at the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C. And we also have many webinars coming up between now and then. So feel free to visit FedInsider.com where you can see what's coming up and register for multiple events at the same time. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast, Feds at the Edge. And with that, this is FedInsider signing off.